The auction hall hummed with the voices of 1,000 different species, each one more bizarre than the last. Giant insectoid creatures scuttled past glowing orb-shaped beings. Beings that resembled humanoid trees exchanged trade secrets with sentient machines. They all came to witness the most anticipated event of the galactic year, the auction of desperate souls. But among them all, one was different. One was human, standing out in a sea of alien life. His name was Ethan, a rebel and a man with a secret. He wasn't here for profit, he was here for something more. And then there she was. Jasmeen, the alien girl who had been sold for nothing. Her hair was a deep shade of violet, flowing like water through her fingers, and her skin was the color of the deepest oceans, rippling as if reflecting an invisible current. She was small, barely 5 feet tall, but there was something in her eyes, something deep, ancient, and defiant, that set her apart from the others. She was worth nothing to them, to the intergalactic elite, but to him, she was a mystery worth solving. To the others, she was just another alien experiment, the kind of being discarded after they were used and deemed ineffective. The stage was set. The intergalactic auctioneer's voice boomed through the hall, amplified to the edges of the galaxy. Up next, a product of the Starfall cluster, captured in the last raid on Rimter 4. A specimen of the Kalsx species, biologically adaptable but politically useless. Offered for the low price of nothing. A cold shiver ran through Jasmeen as the auctioneer's words echoed in her mind. Nothing. Nothing, because to them, she wasn't even worthy of a starting bid. She had been taken from her home planet in a war, sold like cattle, her existence a joke to these beings who saw themselves as far above her kind. Jasmeen had known this day would come, the day when she would be reduced to this. A product to be traded, a being with no voice, no worth, no future. The bids began, but none were for her. A few people looked at her with disdain, some whispering among themselves. Useless, one voice said. Worthless, another chimed in. Jasmeen's heart sank with every word. There were times she questioned if she would ever be seen as anything more than a commodity. Then, suddenly, a voice cut through the air. It was low, firm, and out of place in this vast hall of indifferent creatures. I'll take her. The bidding floor went silent. No one had expected this. A human? Humans were a rare sight at such auctions, and they were considered nothing more than primitive relics of a dying race. Yet here was one, raising his hand in a bid. Ethan. A name most had never heard of. He didn't belong in this place. 100 credits, the auctioneer said, almost as if it was a joke. The audience snickered. I'll pay double, Ethan said, his voice echoing through the hall like a declaration. The murmurs of disbelief began to grow. No one was taking him seriously. Why would anyone, let alone a human, bid for an alien girl who had been discarded by everyone else? 300, Ethan said, pushing the bid higher. He wasn't like the others. He didn't see an alien girl who had no future, he saw something different. Jasmeen's heart raced as she looked into the crowd, unsure whether she was more afraid of the bidders or of Ethan himself. He was human, was he trying to deceive her? Was this some sort of trap? She had been sold before after all. She'd seen how quickly humans could turn against her kind, the way they looked down on her, the way they took advantage of their power. The auctioneer seemed hesitant but raised his gavel. Sold. To the human bidder. The girl is yours for 300 credits. The words were final, and before Jasmeen could process what had just happened, she was led off the stage. The cold metal cuffs on her wrists chafed against her skin as 2 alien guards pushed her forward. Ethan approached her, his expression unreadable. Come with me, he said, his voice soft but commanding. We have a lot to discuss. Jasmeen didn't know what to think. The moment she had been waiting for had arrived. She was no longer a part of the auction block. But the question lingered in her mind like a shadow. Why had this human bought her? Was he different from the rest? Her eyes locked with his, and for a brief moment, she saw something in his gaze, something that made her pause. It wasn't pity. It wasn't judgment. It was something far more complicated. But before she could speak, the guards shoved her into a waiting transport, and the doors slammed shut behind her. The journey to the humans' quarters was silent. Jasmeen didn't know where she was going, only that it was to a place that might, just might, offer her a sliver of hope. She had no idea who this human was or what his intentions were. All she knew was that, for the first time in her life, someone had seen her. Not as a tool. Not as a worthless object. But as something more. As the transport doors opened, Jasmeen looked at the human standing before her. His face was serious, but there was a hint of something that made her feel as if she might be able to breathe for the first time in years. "Jasmeen," the human said, his voice quieter now. "I didn't buy you because you're worthless. I bought you because I believe you're capable of so much more than they ever let you be." For the first time in years, Jasmeen felt a flicker of hope. But was it enough to change everything? The transport doors slid open with a soft hiss, and Jasmeen was led into a small but functional room. The walls were lined with metallic panels, reflecting the faint glow of overhead lights. At first glance, it appeared to be a sterile, clinical space, devoid of any comforts. But to Jasmeen's surprise, there were books stacked neatly in one corner, and a few potted plants sat near a window, their leaves shimmering with an otherworldly glow. She wasn't sure why, but it made the place feel more welcoming. The human who had purchased her, Finn, stood across the room, staring at her with an intensity that sent a jolt of unease through her. She had been in the presence of powerful beings before, but never had she felt the weight of someone's gaze so profoundly. His eyes were deep, dark pools that seemed to hold a lifetime of knowledge and experiences far beyond hers. "You can sit," Ethan said, gesturing toward a simple chair. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made Jasmeen hesitate. She moved cautiously, the cuffs still clinking around her wrists. She hadn't spoken since the auction, too afraid to say anything, unsure of what might happen next. The way Ethan had bid for her had left her with more questions than answers. Why had he chosen her? And why had he paid so much for someone who was deemed worthless? Jasmeen lowered herself into the chair, her violet eyes never leaving Ethan's. He had to be different from the others. No one else would have taken the time to purchase her, let alone pay such an outrageous price. But even so, she was wary. She had learned to trust no one. Ethan watched her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said finally, his voice softer now. "In fact, I want to help you." The words were unexpected. Help her? No one had ever wanted to help her before. People only took her when they needed her, used her for their own gain. It wasn't that she had never dreamed of a life where she was treated with kindness, but it had always felt like an impossibility, something only seen in distant stories, never in her own reality. "You don't need to speak. I can tell you're confused," Ethan continued. "But I need you to trust me. You're not the only one who's been treated like this. I've seen it happen to others, to many others, beings who are cast aside, used as tools. But you're more than that." Jasmeen didn't respond. That was a word she had never really understood. How could she trust him? How could she trust anyone when the universe had shown her time and time again that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford? "I know you're wondering why," Ethan said, breaking her train of thought. "Why me? Why now?" Jasmeen's gaze softened just a little. She hadn't realized she was staring at him, but now her mind was filled with questions. She couldn't help herself. "You're not the first one to buy an alien," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "But you're the first one to look at me like I'm human." Ethan smiled, though it was a faint one. "I'm not here to play the hero. I'm here because you're someone who has potential. And I'm going to show you what that potential is." She looked away, unsure of what to make of his words. She had always been told she was nothing. Potential? "I don't have any." "You do," Ethan insisted. "You just haven't been given the chance to see it." He turned and began to rummage through a nearby desk, pulling out a small, sleek device. He held it up, and Jasmeen's curiosity piqued. She had seen similar devices before, tools used to study alien physiology, sometimes to exploit it. But this one felt different. It was clean, and there was a sense of purpose in Ethan's hands as he moved with practiced precision. "This," he said, "is a neurosync interface. It connects to the brain and allows me to access and analyze mental patterns. I can help you unlock abilities that may be dormant. You don't have to be afraid. The mention of unlocking her abilities caught her attention. It was true that her kind had unique abilities, powers that allowed them to adapt to almost any environment, heal from wounds faster than most species, and even communicate telepathically. But these abilities had been suppressed, hidden, and often misunderstood by the beings who had captured them. Jasmeen had been taught to keep quiet, to hide her power, because showing it would make her a target. Ethan's gaze softened as he noticed the hesitation in her eyes. I know you're scared. You've been hurt and you've been made to feel small. But I won't force anything on you. If you want, you can walk out right now. I'll never stop you. But if you stay, I can help you see what's inside you. Help you change your fate. Jasmeen didn't know what to say. She had spent so long being told that she was nothing, that she was a worthless commodity. But here was this human, this person who didn't see her as a tool, but as someone who could stand on their own. It was difficult to wrap her mind around it. Still, something stirred within her. A flicker of hope. A part of her longed to believe that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. She had nothing to lose, after all. Her voice came out in a soft whisper. What do you need me to do? Ethan's smile widened, the warmth in his eyes genuine. Nothing for now. Just give me a chance, and I'll show you how to take control of your own destiny. For the first time in her life, Jasmeen felt a shift within her. She wasn't sure where this would lead, or if Ethan's words were true. But in that moment, she made a decision. She would trust him. At least for now. All right, she said, her voice stronger than before. Show me. Ethan nodded, and for the first time, Jasmeen felt like she was taking a step toward something greater than herself. The days passed, and with each one, Jasmeen felt herself changing. Ethan had kept his promise. He didn't force her into anything, didn't rush her, and allowed her time to adapt. But it was clear that something within her was beginning to stir. Something powerful, something ancient. The first few sessions with the neurosync interface had been difficult. At first, Jasmeen had resisted. The device felt invasive, its electrodes pressing against her skull, sending sharp pulses of energy into her mind. But Ethan had patiently explained each step, reassuring her that it wasn't meant to hurt her. Slowly, she had learned to trust the process. The device was designed to connect with the brain, to tap into neural patterns and unlock the latent abilities that existed within her, abilities her species had kept hidden for centuries, kept dormant out of fear. Jasmeen wasn't sure what she expected to find, but each session brought new discoveries. Ethan had explained that her species, the Kalsx, were not just biologically adaptable, but they were also capable of extraordinary feats. Their minds could communicate without words, their senses could adapt to any environment, and they could manipulate the world around them through sheer willpower. Powers like that could change the balance of the entire galaxy, and that was why the auction had called her worthless, because the Kalsx could be dangerous, if left unchecked. Focus, Ethan's voice broke through her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. She was sitting on a chair in his quarters, her legs crossed, eyes closed as the neurosync interface hummed softly beside her. Take a deep breath. Relax. Let go of the fear. Jasmeen nodded, though she felt anything but relaxed. Fear had been a constant companion in her life, from the moment she was captured to the endless days she spent as nothing more than a prize to be sold. Letting go of it was no easy task. But she tried. She tried to release the tension in her body, to let go of the doubt that had taken root in her mind. She focused on the steady pulse of the device, felt the rhythm of it as it connected with her brainwaves. The faint tingling sensation in her temples began to spread, slowly at first, and then more intensely, like a wave crashing over her. And then, suddenly, it happened. A surge of energy shot through her body, and Jasmeen gasped as her mind opened like a floodgate. She saw flashes, bright, powerful images, that she couldn't quite comprehend. Her senses heightened. The metallic scent of the room became sharp, almost tangible. She could hear the smallest of sounds, the hum of the air filtration system, the slight creak of the floor beneath her. It was overwhelming, but in a way, it was beautiful. Jasmeen. Ethan's voice sounded distant, but clear. "Can you hear me?" She nodded, though her focus was elsewhere. She could feel something different. Her mind was stretching, expanding, pushing against the limits she had once believed she had. She felt as if she could reach out and touch the stars, as if she could move mountains with a thought. The images became clearer. Flashes of her home planet, Rimter 4, before the invasion. The green hills, the peaceful waters. The Kalsx were a peaceful race, their civilization built on harmony with nature. They had never been conquerors, never been warriors. But that didn't matter to the galactic elites. All that mattered was the power they saw in the Kalsx, the potential they feared. But then the images shifted, darker. She saw the ships, the soldiers, the chaos. The Kalsx had been attacked, their cities burned, their people taken away like livestock. Jasmeen's heart clenched at the memory. She had been one of the lucky ones. She had been sold before the worst of it. But so many others hadn't been. "You're doing it," Ethan said, his voice gentle but full of pride. "You're connecting with your power." Jasmeen's eyes snapped open. The room felt different now. The air was thick with energy, and she could almost feel the walls vibrating under the weight of her newfound abilities. Her hands trembled as she lifted them before her, and without even thinking, she focused on the desk across the room. It wasn't just a desk anymore. It was a solid object, an extension of her own will. The desk's legs trembled, then shifted, moving slowly at first, as though the object were unsure of what was happening. Jasmeen's heart pounded in her chest as she concentrated, willing the desk to rise higher. She felt the weight of it, felt the force she was exerting, but it wasn't hard. It wasn't a struggle. It was just like a second nature, a part of her she had never known existed. She gasped, dropping her hands. The desk crashed back to the ground with a loud thud. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her pulse racing as she stared at the object in front of her. Had she just done that? Ethan was silent for a moment, processing what had just happened. He stepped forward cautiously, his eyes wide with awe. That was incredible. Jasmeen swallowed hard, her hands still trembling. She had always known that there was something inside her, something more than what she had been told, but she had never imagined it would feel like this. Powerful. In control. "I did that," she whispered, the realization settling in. Ethan nodded. "You did. And this is only the beginning. You're capable of so much more." Jasmeen's mind was racing. Her power, her true potential, was finally surfacing. But the fear still lingered. What would she do with it? Could she control it? Could she trust herself not to become the very thing she had been afraid of her entire life? "You don't have to do this alone," Ethan said, his voice steady. "We'll work together. I'll help you master it, every step of the way." Jasmeen looked up at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. It was strange. She had always been told that she was meant to be controlled, to be subjugated. But here was this human, offering to help her not just survive, but thrive. "I don't know how to control it," she said, her voice full of uncertainty. "What if I hurt someone?" "You won't," Ethan assured her. "You have more control than you think. And we'll work on it. One step at a time." Jasmeen nodded, the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. She was scared yet, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't alone in that fear. Ethan had seen something in her, something worth believing in, and that belief was beginning to change her. As she looked at him, a sense of resolve began to grow within her. She wasn't just a slave anymore. She wasn't worthless. She was Jasmeen. And she was going to change everything. The days blurred together as Jasmeen continued her training with Ethan. Each session revealed something new, new abilities, new powers, and a deeper understanding of her own potential. But there was something more. With each passing day, Jasmeen began to see the truth of what had been stolen from her, her identity, her freedom, her voice. She had been sold into a life of nothingness, a life defined by others. But no longer. She wasn't just learning how to control her powers. She was learning how to shape her own destiny. Ethan had been true to his word. He had helped her understand the depths of her abilities, from telekinesis to enhanced perception, even to the point of sensing the emotional state of others. But there was more. There was something inside her, something deeper than the physical abilities. It was a sense of purpose, a need to fight back, to stand up for everything that had been taken from her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of purple and red, Jasmeen stood on the balcony of Ethan's quarters. Her eyes scanned the city below, a sprawling metropolis that thrived on the exploitation of her kind. Everywhere she looked, there were signs of the elites who saw the Kalsx as nothing but tools for their amusement. But what if they were wrong? What if there was a power they couldn't control? "You've been quiet," Ethan's voice came from behind her, calm but concerned. "What's on your mind?" Jasmeen turned to face him, the weight of her thoughts evident in her eyes. "I'm ready," she said simply. "I'm ready to fight." Ethan studied her, his expression unreadable for a moment. "Fight? You know the consequences of defying the system. The elites won't just stand by and let you go free." "I don't care about their consequences," Jasmeen replied, her voice steady, resolute. "I care about what's right. The Kalsx, my people, they've been oppressed for so long. I can't just sit back anymore. Not when I have the power to change everything." Ethan was silent for a moment, and Jasmeen could feel the weight of his gaze on her. He knew what she was capable of. He had seen it with his own eyes. But this was different. This wasn't about self-defense anymore. This was about revolution. "I won't let you go alone," Ethan finally said, his voice firm. "We'll do this together." Jasmeen nodded, the resolve in her heart solidifying. Together. She hadn't realized until now how much she had come to rely on Ethan. He wasn't just her guide or her protector. He was her ally. And now they were ready to face the world. That night, as Jasmeen lay in the small, quiet room she had come to call home, she felt a growing sense of anticipation. Tomorrow, they would begin. Tomorrow, they would infiltrate the heart of the galactic elite stronghold. Tomorrow, she would take back what had been stolen from her, and she would set her people free. The next morning, they set their plan into motion. With the help of Ethan's contacts, a network of underground rebels who had long opposed the galactic aristocracy, they managed to gain access to the highly secure council chambers, where the most powerful beings in the galaxy gathered. But what they didn't know was that they weren't the only ones planning to strike. As they made their way through the darkened corridors, a sudden alarm blared, its shrill sound echoing through the halls. Jasmeen's heart raced as she realized what was happening. The elites knew they were coming. They had been watching her, studying her every move. And now they were ready to strike first. "Ethan," Jasmeen whispered urgently, her hand gripping his arm. "They know. They've been tracking me." "I know," he said, his voice calm but filled with urgency. "We can't turn back now. We're too close." They had no choice but to continue forward, pushing through security barriers, evading guards, and navigating the labyrinthine halls. The further they went, the closer they came to the council chamber. But with every step, the stakes grew higher. They were not just fighting for freedom now. They were fighting for their lives. Finally, they reached the grand doors of the council chamber. The massive, ornate doors were guarded by several high-ranking soldiers. But Jasmeen wasn't afraid. She had learned how to harness her power, to manipulate the very environment around her. With a single thought, she reached out and sent a surge of energy toward the doors, causing them to tremble and groan under the pressure. The soldiers immediately turned toward her, weapons drawn. But before they could react, Jasmeen's mind reached out and disarmed them, sending their weapons flying through the air with a force that left them stunned. "Get inside," she whispered to Ethan, her voice fierce and full of command. They moved quickly, slipping through the doors just as the soldiers regained their footing. Inside the chamber, the elites were gathered, an array of beings from every corner of the galaxy, their eyes trained on the two intruders. "You," one of the council members said, his voice cold and dripping with contempt. "You think you can just walk in here and take what is ours?" Jasmeen stepped forward, her confidence radiating from her every move. "I'm not taking anything. I'm reclaiming what should have always been mine. What should have always been the Kalsx's." The council members exchanged uneasy glances, but Jasmeen wasn't finished. She could feel the power within her, surging stronger with every word she spoke. "You've oppressed my people long enough," Jasmeen continued. And now, the time has come for you to answer for your crimes. You've made the mistake of thinking I was worthless. But I'm not. And I'm not the only one. There are more of us. And together, we will tear down your empire. With a final, powerful thought, Jasmeen reached out with her mind, sending a shockwave of energy that shattered the walls of the chamber, causing the ceiling to crumble and the floor to crack beneath them. Chaos erupted as the council members scrambled to escape, but it was too late. The rebellion had already begun. Jasmeen turned to Ethan, her eyes glowing with a fierce determination. This is just the beginning. And in that moment, she knew that her fate had been changed forever. The world would never see her the same way again. The end. Jasmeen's journey is just the beginning. What happens when the oppressed rise against the oppressors? Could a single person's courage change the future of an entire galaxy? What would you do if you discovered your true potential? The fight for freedom, identity, and justice continues. Will you be a part of it?